Got to adjust my teleprompter.
I was negligent in not introducing Rick Hearst, who is the managing editor of the Miami Herald. So here we go. Rick, take it away.
Well, thanks, Howard, and Sally and John for that terrific panel, and more importantly, for the fantastic work that you unpacked for all of us today. That story made that kind of unique journalistic connection between something that you see every day, those cops, they're passing me, it's so wrong, and unfair, and actually proving it. And that's the kind of connection that really makes good journalism, and the kind of smarts and rigor that you saw the team from the Sun-Sentinel do is what creates really powerful and exceptional work that makes change. And it really speaks to what the Pulitzer Prize demands of us, and that's that as news organizations, we be more ambitious and enterprising about the journalism we do, and we dig more deeply and try to bring more clarity to the world we cover and the communities we cover. And we're proud of that at the Miami Herald. We're proud of our legacy in terms of the Pulitzer Prize. And we're going to talk about one of them, but I think it's important to honor the people who have come before Jackie and Pat, who you'll meet in a second, for the 20 Pulitzer Prizes that we've won at the Herald in a wide variety of categories, from public service to feature writing to investigative reporting, editorial cartooning, editorial writing. It's really, it is something that raises the bar for all of us in journalism, and the question about how things get judged. The rigor of the judging in the Pulitzer Prizes is exceptional. There are lots of journalism contests. There's nothing like this one, where the juries will ask questions of finalists in the entries to further vet the work they've done and question it and make sure that it meets standards. So I'm honored to be on the panel today and to introduce two exceptional homegrown Miami journalists. Pat Farrell grew up in Miami. He attended Columbus High. He joined the Herald in 1987. That was, John Maines, how many years ago was that? You need a car reporter for that. And in his years here, he's been honored by just about every journalism organization you can think of. And Jacqueline Charles was born in the Turks and Caicos Islands, but some people think she was born at the Miami Herald. She attended public school in Miami from about age 8 on, and she joined the Herald as an intern when she was 14 years old and a student at Miami-Jackson High. She attended the University of North Carolina as a Knight Ridder Scholar. I have known,
Chapel Hill.
Chapel Hill, sorry. It's important. How they doing? Oh, never mind. Okay. And Pat and Jackie have had work that has been linked because of their work in Haiti. This is a different kind of Pulitzer Prize that we're going to talk about here. Really a Pulitzer Prize and a finalist entry, or an entry that was a finalist. Patrick won the Pulitzer Prize in 2009 for breaking news photography for his work in Haiti. The Herald in 2011 was a Pulitzer Prize finalist in breaking news for coverage of the earthquake. And Patrick and Jackie played a key role, the key roles, in both of those efforts. Jackie in 2010, after the earthquake, was the first to report that Haitian President René Préval had survived the earthquake. She was the first person to make contact with anyone in what was left of the Haitian government, and then spent most of the next 15 months in Haiti covering the tragedy. But we're going to start by going back to 2008. And that was what a lot of people thought was the worst year Haiti could ever have. In the span of 30 days, there were 4 hurricanes in Haiti. Patrick and Jackie got caught in the coverage of that. But I'm going to let Patrick pick up, and I'm going to tell you that we're going to cheat. It was a great presentation by the Sun-Sentinel, lots of great talking and Q&A. We'll give you a little of that, but we're going to lean heavily on the visuals for this one. So, Patrick, you want to pick it up?
Mostly because I don't talk very well, so that's why. But anyway, thanks, Rick. Thanks, FIU. I'm familiar with a bunch of you. I teach a class here, and I love it. I wanted to start first with a little clip that I have from the newsroom the day the Pulitzer was announced. I was able to scramble my parents over to the newsroom, and my mother decided to take over and talk. And so here's just a little clip about her and the career path she wanted me to take.
Like I said, this is my all your mothers and fathers, when your son wants to develop in the bathroom and it's the girl's bathroom, they say, no, we don't want him in there, and I'm afraid he's going to do pornographic. And I said to him, okay, you can do that, but you're going to be a doctor.
So anyway, she says, you're going to be a doctor. And I remember this conversation. I'm one of 12 kids. I have 5 sisters and 6 brothers. And we should have all been doctors, according to her. And so I remember this conversation senior year of high school when I was, what are you going to be? And I said, well, you know, I love photography. And she goes, no, that's a hobby. You're going to be a doctor like your father. And I understood what she really meant was, you know, my father was this wonderful man, wonderful physician, very kind and very caring. And so that was what she wanted for all of us. And so the last trip I took with Jackie to Haiti, if I'm jumping forward here, my mother passed. And so we came home for the funeral, but my mother became very supportive, and she was always very supportive of all of us. And what I remember is she would, whenever I would talk to her on the phone, it was never, Patrick, how are you doing? It's what is the story? How is everybody doing? And especially, you know, are the children all right? And this is who my mother was. And anyway, so it was in Haiti where we were just a little over a year ago, the last trip I took. Jackie, who doesn't ever stop working, was there. So anyway, I have Jackie. Should I just jump right into the? So Jackie and I went to Haiti to cover the hurricanes in 2008, and after the Pulitzer was announced, Candace Barbeau, this wonderful photographer that I used to work with at the Herald, that's now a filmmaker and an educator, wanted to do a video. So she got all these pictures together that I had shot and laid them out on the floor in the studio at the Herald and started talking to me and filming it. So this is a video from that, which Jackie and I spent.
We flew into Grenada kind of late in the day, and you couldn't think anything could get any worse. It's really just total destruction. Everybody's homeless. You know, hundreds of thousands of people left homeless. There were reports of maybe 300 people dead from just in the aftermath of Tropical Storm Hannah. As we approached Dwayne, you saw the massive destruction, the flooding. And I'm going with reporter Jackie Charles. So Jackie and I ended up going out through the gates of the base, and at the gates it was just a mob of desperate people trying to get food or water or whatever. And we headed out through the gates into the town. We didn't know what to expect. We just trudged through the town and saw, just one unbelievable scene after another of people carrying what they salvaged from, their flooded homes, battered little boxes and suitcases and stuff over their heads. They had grabbed whatever they could, but where were they going to go to? Because the entire place was totally, just destroyed. So we gathered our images of the story and flew back that afternoon, late that afternoon, to Port-au-Prince. We basically thought, okay, we could be done. Lo and behold, we had no idea what a nightmare we were in for when, Hurricane Ike hit. We had no idea, what we would see when we went up to Cabaret the next day. As soon as we got up to town, we saw, the body of a woman right by the side of the river. And then somebody told us about, this other area where all the babies were. And so we went there, and there was a crowd. And, there was 12 babies. There's no way you would ever imagine walking up and seeing 12 babies on the ground that washed away in the storm. As I'm photographing this, Sadie walks through, and he's got kind of a bottle of water, and he grabs his baby and starts cleaning her. His intentions were to, put a pretty dress on her, and out of respect for his daughter, he didn't want her anything dirty and covered in blood, and so he was going to clean her off and put a dress on her. And, he cleaned her off, but he never had a chance to get the dress because the coroner came and started loading the baby's bodies into the back of the pickup truck. And they said, I guess they convinced him that they would take care of her and that they would show respect for her. And so he eventually let them take her, and that's who they're loading into the truck. And just an overwhelming scene. And then, that really was at the end of it. There was so much pain, so much destruction in that small little town of Cabaret that literally Jackie and I just sat in the car for a while. I don't know, to decompress or whatever. And then we made our way back to Port-au-Prince. It kind of was the storm, but then house being washed away. Just, you know, a fragile infrastructure even more fragile. And just throw a couple hurricanes on top of it like this, and it's just, it boggles your mind why something will ever happen like this, or how can they deal with it, or, you know, I don't know. It was overwhelming. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. The worst thing I've ever photographed. Being a photographer, being a news photographer, you know, you're thrust in a situation, you're thrust in the news situations, you see sad situations. And you deal with them, you get behind the camera's a shield, I don't know, but this day I can tell you I have no recollection of how I could have done it, or you know, why I chose to shoot where I shot, or how I shot it, or sometimes you question, you know, is anybody going to see this? Is it going to make a difference? You know? And I think, certainly in this case, I don't know if it's enough. You know, Haiti is just a very difficult place. I don't know if it's enough, but it's got to be a strong. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen.
So, part of doing journalism like this is logistics.
Yeah.
And if you talk to people who work as foreign correspondents, sometimes reporting the story isn't the hardest part. It's actually getting to the story or finding out where the story is. So, Jackie, can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
this?
Okay. So we had 4 hurricanes in 30 days, Faye, Gustav, Hannah, and Ike. When the first one hit Faye, I was actually in Jamaica on assignment. And you have to understand, each one of these hurricanes hit a different part of the country. So it was just tragedy being compounded upon tragedy. So then we had Gustav, and when Gustav hit, we're like, okay, this is a problem, we're getting in. So we got in. And one of the things about being a foreign correspondent is that, you know, you don't have public records, you don't have, you know, nice things that are laid out that you're used to doing when you're covering city government. So you really have to rely on your sources. And from the minute I arrived in Haiti, I called a source of mine who was the number 3 at the UN, Gérard Le Chevalier. And I said, hey, listen, I need to get into Gonaïves. How can we get into Gonaïves? So Gonaïves is a city in Haiti, and it sits like a basin. And it had already been struck by another hurricane in 2004, Jean, in the middle of the night. And you had thousands of people who died because they were completely caught off guard. And at this point, you could not get into Gonaïves. The roads, with the exception of one, was cut off, but just even getting there was a problem. The prime minister at the time had tried to get in, and it almost got washed away. And you couldn't get in by sea because the seas were really rough. So from the minute that the weather went down, the UN decided that they were going to take in a chopper. And he called me and he says, listen, if you can get to Log Base, we've got 1 seat on the chopper. And I said, well, it's 2 of us. This is me and a photographer. And I said, okay, you know what? If there's only 1 seat, let me just let the photographer go, because in this situation, the pictures are much more important, and we can work the story around the photo. So we're in a foreign country. Pat doesn't speak Creole or French, but you know, you've got this major disaster, and no news is really getting out of it. We don't know what's going on. And he called me back and he says, you know what, Jacqueline, I'm going to give you my seat. So he gave me his seat. It was Pat, myself, and another videographer, Jean Valmet, who worked for Reuters at the time. He was a freelancer for Reuters. And when we landed in Gonaives, the pilot says, you've got 45 minutes to go, get what you can, and get back, and we're out of here. And we went in with some top brass from the military, I think the head of the UN military, who was taking a meeting to get a sense of the situation. So imagine you get into a place and people have been landlocked for 3 days, no water, no visitors, no nothing. You're walking through the mud. In some places, the mud is high up to your chest because this place sits like a basin. In other areas, it's thigh high, and we just start, going. And one of the things you have to know about Pat as a photographer is that, and we work together a lot, is he doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to know when the situation is going to turn. So I speak Creole, I'm also Haitian, and so we're going, and people, this is a really tense situation, and it almost feels like the crowd is going to turn on you, because they're looking at you and you're foreigners, and whatever you bring, we need water, we need food, and I'm explaining, and he's like, I don't want to know, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. Let's just keep going. And that's all we kept doing, is just kept going. And as he explained, in terms of just the photos everywhere you went. And one of the, Jean Valmet, who's our colleague and unfortunately just recently passed away, when we were coming back, he passed out. And we stopped and we grabbed him. He was like, no, go. We're like, no, we came together. We have to get out of here together. And we actually at some point debated whether or not to stay, right? But then we're like, if we stay, how are we going to get out? When are we going to get out? And then what if something else happens? How do you get to that next story? Because being in a situation where you can't get out really does not serve a purpose if you can't get the news out. So we grabbed him, we're carrying his equipment, and we get back to the base, and we get into the chopper, and we leave. A couple of days later, we decide to try to get into Gonaives on our own by road. And we were just outside of Gonaives, and there's a fourth hurricane now approaching. And again, a source of mine called me, and he says, where are you? And I'm like, I don't know if you want to know. He says, where are you? I was like, well, I'm just outside Gonaives. He says, you need to come back to Port-au-Prince now. I said, why? He says, the storm is turning, and it's turning toward Gonaives. And again, we had the conversation. The storm is coming. Should we stay? Or should we, again, is there a place that we can go? We could be safe. You know what? It's better for us to be in Port-au-Prince. We started flying back. The last bridge that we crossed, it actually collapsed. And as of this point, Gonaives is completely locked. No way to get in, not by air, not by sea, not by road. And that night, back at the hotel, I'm up all night, and I am listening to the radio and just taking notes, because what happened with the local radio, they had journalists who were out, or people were calling in on, what was happening. And ironically, I'm from Turks and Caicos, and Turks and Caicos got flattened by Ike. So I'm dealing with sort of my own personal, this is where my family's from, this is everything, I don't know what's going on there. And then you're also on assignment, and you're now trying to figure out where to go for the story, where has been the hardest hit. And I remember we were at the Montana Hotel, and I'm sitting and I'm talking to a colleague of mine, and I'm like, okay, I was listening to radio, we're listening, and I kept hearing all these stories about Cabaret, and I had never been there, and he says, yeah, apparently it got hit really bad. I said, well, how far away is it? And he says, oh, it's just outside of Port-au-Prince on National Road 1. I said, do you think we can get there? He says, I'm not sure, because there was a lot of rain, a lot of mud. I said, okay, you know what, Pat, we're gonna go, let's see how far we can get into Cabaret. So that's what we did. We got in the car, and we started driving there, and you see the mountains are just peeling. The mudslides are coming. The water is high on the road, but you still are able to pass. And then when we finally got into Cabaret, and we were like the first foreign journalists that were actually in there, I saw a friend of mine who's another Haitian journalist, and he says, go that way, go that way. And from the minute you arrive, they're just dead bodies. They're floating in the river, they're on the road. And when we started seeing a crowd gathering, and it was like one of the few buildings that was cement block, cinder block, modern building. And we got out the car, and when we got in, people were grabbing me. And that's when we arrived and you saw the babies on there. And at this point, you're a reporter and you're carrying notes, and I just remember just at this point, forget the notes, I just get on the phone, call the office, and I just start dictating just, what I'm seeing. And as I'm doing this is when Franz, the father, he comes and he pulls Pat because he wanted to document this moment. He had been looking for his daughter. She'd been washed out of the house in the middle of the night. What happens with this particular city was that people, in the Caribbean, whether it's Haiti or it's Jamaica, people don't want to leave their homes, they don't want to go into shelters. And so because the storm started pounding down in the middle of the night, mothers were running with their children, and between the rain and also the rivers, the children were getting washed out of their hands. And there were two particular rivers in his town. One brought down babies, and the other one brought down old people, the elderly. And I remember they wanted me to go to, and at that point, when you saw all of that destruction, you were just, as he described, it was just unbelievable, and you just thought that it was just the worst thing that you could see. And in getting out, back to the logistics issue, we're getting out, and we now have to send these pictures, and we couldn't get enough sunlight for the satellite to work. So we said, okay, let's start getting back to Port-au-Prince. Well, that road that we went down, all of a sudden it turned into almost like the ocean. And we're in it, and we are stuck. And he's like, do you know how to swim? I'm like, not really. And on the left, there's literally the ocean. On the right, there's a mountain that's peeling down, mudslides, and we are basically stuck, in this huge river, you could say. And I have to tell you, I've been covering Haiti forever. I was going to Haiti all my life. I had never seen a Haitian fire truck until this very particular moment. I looked back, and it was this truck that came up behind us, and we started flagging it, and then what they did was they literally pushed us until we could get to a place where the water wasn't so high and the vehicle could get moving again, and we were able to actually get back and to send the photos.
So you're in Haiti,
Yeah.
and you're filing stories, and Patrick, you're filing pictures back to Miami. Do you know what's going to happen with them?
No, and I'll back
But
up.
yeah.
I'll back up just a little bit.
Okay.
So when I was making photographs in Cabaret, Franz Samidi, the guy who's holding his daughter, grabs my arm and says, give me a picture in broken English. This is my baby. And I was like, it dawned on me after a little bit that, he saw Jackie and I as this conduit to, the outside world. And so I just kind of nodded and felt like we made this nonverbal commitment to publish, to get a picture published to show what this town and what Franz Samidi had gone through. And so the obstacles, like Jackie described, the sat phone, I couldn't get it to work. Jackie was sending stuff from her BlackBerry, but I couldn't get pictures to go from the sat phone. It was drizzling a little bit. So then we got stuck in the water, and Jackie didn't describe it totally. The car started to shake. The water was almost
moving
up to coming into the windows, and Faubert, the driver, was climbing out to get on the roof of the car, either just to stay up there or to flag
Try
somebody
to see if we
down.
can flag somebody down, yeah.
So he got the fire truck, he flagged the fire truck, and they pushed us out. And these are all these obstacles along the way that I thought, oh shoot, I'm not going to be able to get images out anyway. And then I got back to the hotel and I called my boss and I said, I can't even describe it. It's one of the most awful things I'd ever seen. I'll just start sending pictures. And I started sending the pictures kind of in the order I thought were more palatable, because it was death and it was really graphic and it was really hard to look at. And so I sent, 22 pictures. And then I called Jody, my wife, and I told Jody it was this really horrible scene. And, we had that husband-wife journalist conversation. And then I went down to see Jackie, and Jackie was busy, get out of here. No,
I had gotten a text. I had gotten an email from a colleague in the newsroom, like sort of the quiet FYI. There's this huge debate that's going on right now in the newsroom about these photos and not wanting to run these photos. So as he's telling you, imagine all that we went through, and you don't even know if the photos even fully capture what you just saw and what you were experiencing. And then you're hearing back at, the newsroom, there's actually, the thought of not running some of these photos because they were so graphic and they were so difficult.
So, and I'll pick up the thread there, and I was part of some of that conversation, but there are certain, when we do not routinely run pictures of dead bodies on the front page of the Miami Herald. There are sensitivities to both in terms of respecting the dead and what our audience considers acceptable. It's something that no editor really knows. You have some idea of where the boundaries are. I can tell you from experience that when we cross it for some of our readers, we certainly hear about it. And the digital world is different than the print world in that in the digital world, we can publish something, and before you click on it, we can say, warning, really tough stuff to look at if you click here. And then people can make a decision about whether they want to proceed. And even then, there are some things that we would not, have not published. But here was a case of a disaster, a catastrophe, a tremendous loss of life. And so the amount of debate that went into discussing every single photo that we did or didn't publish, it went on for hours. It went on into the night. We ended up publishing many of the pictures, certainly not all the ones that you saw in that video. But the front page picture the next day was of France.
Which was the first image I saw.
Right.
Yeah.
It was
Holding his daughter with the crowd around, and there was great hand-wringing and consternation about whether that was the right thing to do. The outcome was, aside from some people who thought, wow, that's too tough stuff for me to see with my coffee in the morning, was, well, why don't you tell us?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of reaction from people, just our readers and people wanting to help and people wanting to do something. Because, largely I have to tell you, too, after all of these disasters, the government was just really struggling. I mean, there was just no money in the international aid world to come to Haiti's assistance. But Rick says weeks. I have to tell you, the debate actually went on for weeks because we then, as a result of this tragedy, right, then you had the malnutrition, and then you had this explosion of children that were being born, of women that were giving birth, and again, no aid money that was coming in, and we had a school collapse. And then the debate started again when we went to do the story about women at this Doctors Without Borders clinic who were having, giving birth under these horrible circumstances after 4 back-to-back hurricanes, after malnutrition, a country in crisis. And so now they're back in the newsroom. There's a discussion about printing these photos, and it's photos of women half naked, on a birthing table in labor. And I have to tell you, and we actually disagreed about this because I did object to some of those photos being published on the front page, just in terms of privacy issue. And so some of the same discussions, or the discussions that happened with the other photos, where I was like, we need to print those, I had a different viewpoint. So there isn't like a golden rule, or, I felt that with the hurricanes, that this tragedy was of such a magnitude that it needed to be brought to the world, that people really needed to see it and to understand it. And even those photos probably would not transcend just how tragic and horrible this was. With the photos, which was part of the compounding with the women giving birth, I just felt there that they were entitled to a little bit more privacy. And I just kept saying, if this was a woman at Jackson Memorial Hospital, would we have put this photo on the front page?
So I think the takeaway for all of us is there's no rule book. Every one of these kinds of stories brings up incredibly difficult choices, incredibly difficult work for the journalists on the ground. But then, and you can say in the comfort of the offices, what's the right thing to do with this work? And you try to do the best you can and live with the decisions you make. So we're going to transition here because those were really difficult decisions after the hurricanes of 2008. And then there was 2010,
Yeah.
January 2010, and the earthquake. And we have two veterans of covering difficult stories here. But a story that made the hurricanes look like a thunderstorm. So I don't know if you want to start here with the conversation or the video.
Do you want to just show?
Yeah.
We are just now beginning to learn the extent of the devastation, but the reports and images that we've seen of collapsed hospitals, crumbled homes, and men and women carrying their injured neighbors through the streets are truly heart-wrenching.
A week where the dead, the injured, and the homeless are sharing a city largely reduced to rubble.
The headlines from Haiti this morning, even as we speak, the country's president, Rene Preval, told the Miami Herald this morning that many thousands may have been killed. The devastation in his eyes unimaginable. And among those dead, we hear this morning the body of Archbishop Joseph Serge Migo, 63, found in the ruins of his office.
But as one of the largest relief operations in history continues, it is upon Haiti's government, the business community, and above all, its people, that responsibility for rebuilding the country will fall.
kind of tight on time, so I'm going to just stop it right here.
In camps and amidst the rubble of their former homes, many Haitians are.
So I think it'd be worth talking a little bit about the logistics in the story here. One quick introduction or note that I would make is, so in 2010, just from 2008 to 2010, now we're bringing video into the equation. We did a documentary which Jacqueline co-produced that won a regional Emmy off of that, but the storytelling methods are changing. But this was as difficult?
Yes, I mean
More difficult?
more difficult. So we're in the newsroom. I'm actually trying to track down a story about something that's involving former President Bill Clinton and Haiti, and how Haiti's about to get in trouble with the international community because of some borrowing that it's done. And Nancy San Martin, who's an editor at the Herald, and she's a former foreign correspondent herself, and she walks over to me and she says, AP just moved a bulletin, earthquake in Haiti. And I'm like, huh? And it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so AP had a reporter, Jonathan Katz, who was there, and he was able to just basically get one message out to his bosses before the apartment that he was in came down. I mean, he survived, luckily, and his colleagues. So at this point, we're just trying to figure out how bad this is. So, and I have to tell you, I had, at the time the president was President Rene Preval, and I had his private cell phone number, and I don't remember how I got it, but I knew that I would only ever get to use this phone number once. You know, that I had no business getting it. Somebody had given it to me. It was always in my phone, but I knew the day that I use it, that would be the first, last, and the only time I ever get to call the president on his phone, but it would have to be something major. And never did I imagine that that major would be a 7.0 earthquake. And of course, I'm trying to call, and I cannot get through. I cannot get him. At the same time, we're trying to get on Facebook, we're trying to get on Twitter. I'm just calling everybody I could get in Haiti, including Gérard Le Chevalier, who's number 3 at the UN, who had helped me 2 years before and on many occasions. And the phone is ringing, and I'm also praying that he's out someplace, meeting somebody. The entire UN brass also died in that quake. They were having a meeting with a visiting Chinese delegation that day, and the building that they were in, an old hotel, it collapsed. And so you really don't know the extent of the tragedy. At the same time, we're trying to see how we can get reporters on a flight, whatever they can get. So there's a last flight at 8 o'clock that's leaving through the Dominican Republic. And so we get Pat and we get 2 other reporters. One of the reporters, I said, whatever you do, don't end up in Cape Haitian. He ends up in Cape Haitian. But just trying to get them close to the island. At the same time, we're trying to figure out how to get me there. CNN, everybody's calling, they want interviews. Eventually we get a charter. My one-way seat was $3,000. I think AP should reimburse us for that, by the way. And we were supposed to leave at 3 a.m. and we don't leave at 3 a.m. and we're at the airport and we can't leave. And I said, why can't we leave? And the pilot says, well, we need permission to land. Nothing's working. We can't go in. What if they shoot us down? What's going on? And so I'm still trying to get a hold of President Preval, trying to get a hold of him. I finally get a hold of him, and at the moment I'm on the phone with him, he's literally stepping over dead bodies at the Parliament building. And he's like, where are you? When are you getting here? We need help. And I said, I'm trying to get there, but we need permission to land. He's like, you have permission to land. And so at that point, I said to the pilot, we can go, we just got permission to land. And we flew in, and when we flew in, ironically, Wyclef Jean was coming in at the same time, and I can't get a hold of anybody, so I don't even know how I'm gonna be able to get around from the city, but I see Wyclef and I start running, and I'm like, okay, if anybody's gonna get a car, I have a car waiting for them, it's Wyclef, right? So we walk off the plane, and I walk into the entire government. The president is there, the prime minister is there, so the former prime minister, but the whole cabinet, they are there at the airport, and the place was like an atomic bomb had dropped on it. And Wyclef is there with his wife. So he and we start walking, and we're actually like trying to hitchhike outside. You know, we walk over a mile trying to flag somebody down to give us a ride. And we finally, we hopped in a truck, one of these Haitian taxis, and we're going up, and all you saw were destructions. If 2008 had not happened for me as a journalist, I don't know how I would have been able to react to 2010. I'm the person that passes out at funerals, and at some point you develop blinders. You're riding around in this city that has just been destroyed by an earthquake, and at the side of your eyes you see mountains, and you think that it's trash. It's not trash, it's dead bodies. People often talked about the mass graves and what happened, but the government they went and arrested judges and people to try and document, take names and document this, and people were not prepared for this. They couldn't do it. And I often just say is that, even when the U.S. military finally ended up, they didn't bring body bags. So, and there was over 300,000 people who died in this tragedy. So the first couple of days, just getting around was difficult. Myself, I had just been in an MRI machine. I had an issue with my knee, so I was riding around on a motorcycle for a couple of days. We had gas shipped over from the Dominican Republic. Somebody brought in some gallons of gas. I remember by the time I got to it I finally hooked up with my driver a couple of days later. Couldn't get any gas. People who had access to gas, it was diesel. We were on gasoline. But again, you had to just get the story, trying to get the story, and we did, and we spread out. We had a reporter, Leslie. I managed to get her onto an aid flight that USAID was doing, and she hid out in the U.S. Embassy for like several days. They kept trying to find her to kick her out. But she managed to just keep hidden but keep visible enough that every time they were going out on a rescue mission, she was able to be there and be embedded with them while they were doing that. Cell phones were not working at the time, so you're just basically going on instincts. And again, so the story that a lot of people told was that the government was invisible and the government wasn't there. But a lot of journalists who came. They had never been to Haiti. They didn't cover Haiti, and they went to the obvious place where they assumed was the National Palace. But guess what? The palace had collapsed. When I arrived and I ran into the entire government, the first question I asked was, where are you guys based? And the government, the president, they were based at the police station near the airport. And a lot of the foreign journalists who came, they camped out at the international airport as opposed to the domestic airport. And you would have these scenarios where, for instance, when Hillary Clinton came, all of the foreign press were there, but the Haitian press was not there. So when the Haitian government was holding a press conference, the foreign press was not there. You just had this really divided situation. We were there at the Herald. We were there where the government was. The president was the most accessible in his 5 years, but we saw what was going back and forth. And again, that's just from being able to cover a story, get to the story, and then being able to frame the story to say, what does this mean? And then also, how did it happen?
So, Pat, how do you take pictures in that environment? You spoke to it a little bit in the other video, but
it's hard to say. I mean, I guess I'm getting paid to be, these eyes for folks that aren't going to be on the scene. But sometimes it's hard, and sometimes somebody doesn't want you to shoot their picture, or, and you have to be sensitive to that. And probably the most qualified thing I can do is shoot pictures, so. I think, and I think about this a lot, if I were ever to run into a situation where I was the first person there and there was a rescue to happen, that's probably what I would do. And any photographer I know that I really respect their work, I feel that they would do the same thing. But it's rarely the case. But what is the responsibility is to actually, make these images. And I'm never the person that makes the choice of what runs in the publication. It's, but I don't hesitate to send back what I've seen, but at the same time, I'm very empathetic to whatever situation I'm in. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's
Well, why don't we take some questions from those of you who are gathered here. We're into overtime, and so if there are any, for Pat and for Jackie.
How do you take care of yourselves, not just while you're there, but afterwards? How do you keep yourselves? I've known journalists who have covered wars, and they're empty shells. They're numb. But they have no more emotions. And I know you guys are not like that. How do you take care of yourselves covering such trauma?
I don't know. Well, I have to tell you, I mean, I don't think Rick knows this, but they kept trying to get me to go to PTSD.
Right.
And I didn't do it. And Audra Birch, who's a colleague of mine and a friend of mine, I remember, she's saying to me, have you cried? Have you, like she kept waiting for me to have this moment, and I didn't have the moment. And I called a friend of mine, and he was one of the first people on the front lines, and he's a doctor. And I called him up and I said, let me ask you something, because I needed to check my own mental health. And I said, have you cried? And he said, no. And I said, why not? And he said, because if I start crying, I'll never stop crying. And I have to tell you, you get to this point, you're sensitive, but you're also kind of desensitized. I'll admit that as a result of covering these tragedies, it is very difficult for me to attend funerals of people that I know, because that is where the emotions come out, as opposed to now I can look at these photos and it's just photos I'm seeing, as opposed to probably some of the emotions that some of you are seeing for the first time, because I've lived it and relived it. I feel just as a journalist, the best thing I can do is that I can be there and I can tell the story and I can document this. And the minute you sort of stop, you're afraid that you're going to become useless in your ability to do. And I always tell people in Haiti, everywhere you go, there is a sad story, but there is joy, there is happiness, and there is dignity in poverty. But and as much as you want to change the situation, you have to ask yourself first: is that okay? Before I go and do this, can I sustain it? If you can't sustain it, leave it alone. That blind man has figured out how to work that room, and he's managed to do it. The minute you start to change things around and you're not going to be there to keep it going, you've now disrupted his world. Is that fair to him? So that is just sort of my way of dealing and of coping with it.
Patrick, you want to take that one?
That might be a better question for my wife, but I definitely I'm way too emotional, I think, and I think that's pretty important for journalists. I think if you're going to cover something and you don't emotionally react to it, that maybe there's got to be that, I feel, and I didn't lose a child there, but I felt for Franz Samidi really, really badly, and I think about it. It's hard to look at the pictures again. It's. But at the same time, I think it's what we do as journalists is very important, and that story was very important, and the earthquake was really important. 300,000 people died. That's just mind-boggling, and so these are things that I don't know. Neil, is that the answer?
Right. Well, and part of it is documenting history, and part of it is bringing that story to people who can try to respond to the needs. So, another one?
I think this is going to be our last question,
Okay.
because we are running over, and then we're going to ask Rick, and I think he's going to wrap us up.
I was just wondering if that father was able to ever see those photos that you took.
Yeah. We took him a copy of the paper, of the newspaper, and we visited him and did a follow-up sometime after. And he appreciated it. I mean, he, in this sense, he asked for that photo. He needed something to kind of document this moment. It was still unbelievable for him. He had spent all day looking for his daughter, and then he finally found her, and it was still shocking. So when he saw Patrick, he grabbed him, and he wanted him to take that photo, to take the photo of his little girl.
Okay, well, thank you, Jackie and Patrick. And Judith Pinto, the executive director, will close us out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Wow, what an inspiring panel, and what a tremendous opportunity for our students to hear from top professionals who can tell us how to tell these amazing stories with words, with images, with video. So thank you so much to the Sun-Sentinel, the Miami Herald, and the SJMC Hearst Committee for collaborating and bringing this event to FIU. And so in the tradition of the Pulitzer Prize, tonight we will be awarding our own students at our 25th annual Student Awards ceremony. In the meantime, I would like to invite you all to a reception at the Wolf University Center, which is out the door and to the left. So you can follow the paw prints on the ground. And thank you again.